So I'd like to call the meeting to order. I believe, Linda, you had volunteered to be clerk for the first meeting, or is that to be assigned at this?
I did. Would you like to take attendance?
Yes. So Scott, are you here?
Here.
Dan?
I am here.
Linda?
I'm here.
Peter? I'm here too. Elizabeth Hughes?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Elizabeth. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm here.
All right, and we're missing Emily and Aaron at this point.
So in terms of clerk, yes, I was clerk, and I did receive a draft from from Shannon, and it looked fine to me, but I think I got back to her too late before she went on vacation, so I don't believe it was circulated to everyone else, but there is, so I assume that when she returns, that will be possible. The minutes were very brief and to the point as to points of discussion, and the votes, primarily for the officers of the subcommittee, and that was it. So I recommend highly that people be clerk, and I assume that Shannon would assist with preparation of minutes because we would have a recording that she could work on when she returned, or not.
So Linda, that's a great point. Should we record this?
It is being recorded. Elizabeth,
Sorry, I missed that. Elizabeth, you're muted.
Now you're off.
So, Peter, you started the recording?
There was something that said AI recording,
Okay,
but I didn't touch anything.
okay.
My wife is conditioned to me not to, get too technical because things go. So, if is there a way you can check and make sure that it's recording now, Elizabeth?
I think it's the host is recording the cloud recording.
Okay, so
Okay.
sounds like we're recording.
Okay,
Good. All right, and so as Linda said, we're not going to have minutes for last week's meeting. We'll have minutes hopefully from this, and they both can be voted on at our next session. So next on our agenda is debrief the advisory from the advisory board meeting and action items for subcommittees. So from our last meeting, we were charged with coming up with a subcommittee charter, a work plan, and budgetary requests. I did a draft charter as a point of discussion that's included in your handouts. And we could start with that if people want to use that as a point of departure for our committee charter.
Do you want me to share the document, the draft?
Yeah, sure. Can we do that, Scott? That would be great.
You see it?
Yeah, great. Thank you, sir. So again, objective is identify uses for the site and prepare recommendations to include these in a zoning amendment for the site and the adjacent Junction Village parcel. People comfortable with that for subcommittee objective? Do we want to add anything to it?
Peter, one question. I understand the idea that we're tasked with helping with the zoning amendment, but there's nothing mentioning the visioning that goes in parallel with the zoning. Because I think we're going to be taking community input and coordinating with our visioning consultant at some point in time that's going to be in then parallel doing the zoning off of that visioning. Is that correct? So there's nothing mentioning a visioning person or visioning consultant with our objective, because I think we want to be very involved with the conduit between the community and our committee with that visioning architect, and then that goes into the zoning amendment that's all sort of tied together.
About,
You disagree? Anybody disagree, or we agree with that? Or
no, I agree with that, and I see Elizabeth has her hand up. I was just going to suggest that we preface it with through consultation, through a community visioning process, we identify and then uses for the site and prepare recommendations. So just sort of add that through a community visiting, a visualization process or visioning.
But you can't, I think you can do a community visualization process, but my sense is until we understand from our committee and the town and the visioning master planning, then you know what you're zoning. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's usually how we do it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think to build on what you're saying, Scott, I think this is probably the crux of what we really need to sort out as a committee, as a subcommittee, in my mind. What role do we see ourselves playing relative to the visioning process, leading it, supporting it, following it, and embedded in that, we've talked a little bit about on the edges of this, embedded in that visioning process is a sort of economic analysis as well.
Exactly.
And so I appreciate, Peter, what I think the intent behind this, which is to create these broad words or categories. I think, especially after, and I'll probably share this a little later, certainly on Monday, but certainly after the most recent coordination meeting with DCAM, I think we as a subcommittee need to get very clear about this and then make recommendations to the full board.
So you want to expand on that a little bit more, Dan?
Which part? Yes. Which
So
part?
you talked about visioning and you talked about economic analysis, and then we talked building off of the original idea of making recommendations for land use and zoning. So we know we need to do the the visioning first. Then we do the analysis of the scenarios. And that's the economic analysis is a large part of that. And then we make our recommendations. Is that sort of the way it lines up for people? I see Linda has her hand up and Elizabeth. Linda?
This is a different point, and that is that I don't think we want to focus entirely on zoning, because I think that there are some preferences that will come up from the community that cannot be incorporated in zoning, but will have to be incorporated in preferences that would go into the development process.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to put something in that says zoning and land use planning, perhaps, or land use development. And then another item is, here we're just talking in a very descriptive way with identifying uses for the site. And for me, I think we want to identify uses. There are many, many uses that could be identified, but we either want to prioritize them or ascribe some weight based on the visioning and the community input it be received, because I don't think we want to just go into zoning saying, here are the 57 things that could go on the site. Let's zone them all in. We really have to make some choices or recommend to the, obviously the full board or the, then the select board, those items. Those are my 2 points right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So Elizabeth,
Sorry, my hand keeps lowering all by itself. If I don't talk. So as y'all are talking, I'm typing just to kind of put a framework into what you're saying. To assist and support in the community visioning scenario priorities and land use impact process to develop potential uses for the site that can be incorporated into DCAM's land use development. And I use process a lot, but it's only because I'm typing and not thinking. Land use development process and advance to potential zoning for MCI Concord site and the adjacent Junction Village parcel. So it's just
Wow.
kind of starting to mesh what you're saying into an objective.
yeah, and then I think later we sort of hit on some of the things about running, various scenarios that address the potential land uses. So that includes an economic analysis of those scenarios, what their impacts will be on town infrastructure and services, so that we can compare them maybe in a matrix and then present that information to the community in terms of our recommendations of what we think.
Right, as one of, your key responsibilities, I
Yeah.
thought we were just talking about the subcommittee objective
Yeah.
statement.
Dan has his hand up.
Yeah, I think that's great, Elizabeth, and helps move it forward. I think the one thing that I think it's missing, but I might be wrong, is that this is all of this work is founded upon
Community.
the input we get from the community engagement process. So it's if you remember the last time I think we talked about it, it's a 1, 2, 3. Capture the community engagement information, do the land planning, generate zoning that responds to that, the first 2 steps.
That makes sense.
All right, so one more time. Yeah,
You mean the sequence or just
Yeah.
what? So as I see it, it is capture the community input through the community engagement process.
right, so
Use that.
so that's one chunk, and that's where I had to assist and support in the community visioning scenario priority or visioning scenario process. And that can be whatever you guys feel that entails. So that's one chunk.
Then, sorry.
What was 2?
2 is doing the actual land planning and envisioning. So it's the capture and all I'm saying is that we're not responsible for doing, this committee is not responsible for doing community engagement piece per se, but capture. It's responsible for taking that information, understanding it, vetting it, and then actually using it as foundation for the visioning process that we would pursue. And it also becomes theoretically some of the means by which we'd evaluate some of the possible scenarios that we would be pursuing. And then,
So, and then agreed. So there's going to be this DCAM community visioning scenario process.
well, that's another conversation entirely, Elizabeth. It's an important one, but and I want to have a discussion with this group, but I'm not sure we're ready to just hand the reins over to BCAN on that, who's hiring that group. So words matter in this case. That's why I'm kind of
No,
calling that out.
Just want to note Aaron has joined the meeting. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
No worries. So we're taking a look at the sort of initial subcommittee objectives. We've decided that we need to amend the initial draft to include capture community input through community engagement, and then taking the information from the engagement, utilizing it in a visioning process to generate preferred uses for land use development, both zoning and other tools such as deed restrictions to sort of set up what we can then run scenario analysis on. Does that sort of capture it?
Yeah. And then I think you were alluding to, and I think Elizabeth talked about, ultimately, I think it results in zoning, and Linda talked about it as well, some sort of zoning or whatever means by which we can have the highest probability of satisfying ourselves. We'll have the highest probability of successfully realizing these ideas and visions.
One of the things I've been wondering that maybe doesn't quite, maybe zoning is not the right word for it, but presumably there will be some portions of the parcel that are sectioned out for maybe not conveyance to the developer and then would go to the town, like the wastewater treatment plant or something like that, or there might be some recreation or riverfront or something like that that would be part of the parcel. That doesn't seem like it's totally part of zoning. It's sort of more a delineation of the parcel to go to to be in the developer purview, or to be in DCAM's kind of purview to bid out to a developer. So I don't know if maybe that's too specific, but I don't know if there's something that needs to kind of identify, kind of further breakdown of the parcel.
I think I understood Peter's, if I understood correctly, that's what he was talking about, deed restrictions and things like that, but maybe
Yeah, that's part of it. And I think, when we have our next subcommittee meeting, I asked Elizabeth to talk to the GIS staff at town and see if we can identify development constraints on the parcel. By itself, it's 37 acres, but we've got a 200-foot river setback. We've got floodplains, we've got wetlands. How much of that 37 acres is actually buildable? And then you got to subtract out the wastewater treatment facility and, the beds associated with the treatment plant. So how many acres are we really talking about, both here and then on the CHDC Junction Village parcel? So I think when we go through massaging the committee charter, I just think we put our thinking hats on and come up with the GIS layers we want to have shown on a map of the parcel so that we can take a look at it as a group at our next meeting.
Yeah, I think that sounds perfect, Peter. I just didn't know if within our key responsibilities, if we wanted to say that we were, maybe doing something like that to, we just talk about it. At least what's written here is something about zoning. I know you mentioned deed restrictions, so maybe that just needs to be added.
Okay, let's sort of head back here to the subcommittee objective. Elizabeth, were you taking notes? Do you have a sense of where where we're at with capturing the constraints. You're muted at this point.
Not sure. Give me 2 more seconds.
Okay. So Aaron, to answer your sort of question, I think, and to tie visioning back into this, I think when we do the visioning of the site, it includes things like, utilizing the riverfront setback area for recreation purposes, and other aspects along those lines. A lot of it's, how close is our relationship going to be with DCAM, so we can ask them to put a deed restriction on it to restrict it to just light industrial uses that don't require more than 200,000 gallons of water, something along those lines. So we can really sort of set the table through, the provisions of sale in collaboration with DCAM.
Yeah, I think there's restrictions on what the developer can do, but there's also a like separation of where their parcel what portion of the parcel. It's probably not the whole site, right? It's probably, and maybe there's multiple developers and it's multiple parcels or something like that. So just thinking that language might want to be part of that we will help identify the parcels for conveyance to a developer.
Okay.
It's great.
All right, so it might be easier just to, well, anyways. And to Dan's comments, about the visioning and how that moves on, that's a conversation that still has to happen. So at this point, I'll have to assist and support in the community visioning scenario process, capture the community engagement to develop land use scenarios, identify community impacts and benefits for the scenarios. So the community can advance a scenario for potential zoning for the site and adjacent Junction Village parcel. And to Linda's point, and I don't know if this is the right words, Linda, and develop specifications in the DCAM, I think it's land use development process, or is it land use, is it development process or the disposition process? Is that, I'm not sure I understood your comment.
Yeah, I think the disposition process. Yeah.
Thank you for taking notes on the fly here, Elizabeth. It's appreciated.
I don't know if that accurately gets everything, but
well, let's say that is the subcommittee objective, sort of the 3-step process: capture, community engagement, base a vision on the information from that, and then make recommendations for preferred land uses and zoning as the 3rd step.
Yeah, that's great.
And then we go into responsibilities. I think as shown on the draft that's on our screen, We want to coordinate with the town, with the state, with all of the other subcommittees. And we've already underscored how important it is to have close connections with the community engagement group, because they're going to be feeding us information that is going to be the basis of our initial work. People okay with the coordination responsibility? Okay, I think we've also mentioned a couple of times that it's important that we review the RFP for the zoning and visioning consultant and work with town staff and DCAM to reduce the duplication of efforts. People comfortable with that or want to wordsmith that? I think the third bullet point there just underscores the importance of our role as active listeners to the community and the engagement portion. I'm expecting I'm going to be trying to sit in on as many of the community engagement processes that are open to the public as possible, taking my own notes on that. I hope other people will as well. I see Erin has her hand up and also Elizabeth. Erin?
I was just going to add, I'm on the community outreach subcommittee, so I don't know if we just want to reference like working in conjunction with our other subcommittee that's primarily focused on community outreach, just so we our goal on that committee is obviously to get this input and then share it with the group and just make sure that we're kind of funneling that way.
Yeah, I would suggest we capture that by under key responsibilities. One, just getting rid of the period at the end, put a comma and say especially the community outreach subcommittee. Period.
Yeah, or through collaboration with the subcommittee or something like that.
Yeah. Number 4 is basically the scenario analysis, looking at the impacts of potential uses.
So,
Elizabeth has her hand up.
yeah, so the zoning consultant would not be doing impact analysis. The zoning consultant would not be.
Is that so maybe we need to.
So it's my understanding that is part of this process, working with DCAM and having the community visioning and coming up with the ideas and the different scenarios, that is part of that process, is to look at those different community impacts.
That's my understanding as well.
So that is that MCI's DCAM's
well, it's potential. It's the same issue. I mean, what they're looking at is trying to find somebody that can do all those different pieces, maybe under one roof, perhaps not.
But are they responsible for hiring the consultant to do the scenario impact analysis?
This
Or
is
we?
this is part of the conversation.
Okay, so let's just identify, as we were requested by the greater committee, to identify potential budget issues and consultants that might be needed. So I would say we need to make sure that there's a scenario fiscal impact analysis conducted by who is open to interpretation at this point.
So I think you can just say, once uses have been identified, work with a consultant to run scenarios to assess the impacts and benefits for different land uses.
Okay, so once the potential uses have been identified, there'll be a scenario analysis which will look at the fiscal impacts to the community in terms of our infrastructure and costs associated with supporting the different uses. And that will be done by, as yet undetermined, but I think we're saying that it should be done, and it should be included should be done either by the town or by DCAM, and that should be budgeted for. Okay. All right. Other additions under key responsibilities.
So, Peter, one thing I'm wondering about is that I know the town has their needs, and I know DCAM is actually probably pinpointing this land for some potential state use, maybe carving it out. I remember hearing them early on saying, oh, it'd be great for some DPW or some state use. Do we know that? And we think our committee has to vet out the needs of the town and what they're looking at the site for, and what the state's potentially looking at the site for, and how Route 2 is going to be affecting the site.
Right. I think a lot of those issues, they've touched on those. The state wants housing. It wants.
No, I'm not talking about what they want in our development. I'm talking about, does town want to move some public offices to the site or garage spaces for DPW, or does the state want to have like a state highway building there, or do they want to have something else there in addition to the development zone?
Okay, so you're saying, Scott, basically we need to identify if there are any state or town uses that.
I think Elizabeth probably knows there's probably some talk in Concord about using some of that site for Concord use. There was potentially talk about moving some uses over that site. That's not going to be part of probably the development RFP. I'm guessing. That's all about the deed restrictions and all that. It's about how it's, but I think we have to know what DCAM's thinking and what the town of Concord's thinking, because we're going out to an RFP, and are they going to be a part of that RFP, or are they going to be, it's going to be separate deeded restrictions off to the side?
Yeah, that was a little of my point. Like, there's probably portions of the parcel that are not conveyed to the developer for their project.
Yeah.
And what those are for and how they're used, there's another story, but
we have to know. I think there's talk, but we as a committee are not hearing about it, about what their thoughts are, the town or DCAM. I think we collectively as a group have to start hearing about what their thoughts are before we're surprised by, oh, I wanted that corner for this DPW site. I wanted for our administration offices for school. I mean, we have to learn about this stuff early on in the process so we don't get surprised.
I think it comes back to Peter and Erin's point, of understanding how much of the land is buildable and what are sort of some existing or proposed conditions that are going to have an impact on the overall area, buildable area of the site, whether it's wastewater treatment or some other municipal use.
Right.
Yeah.
maybe this is,
Go ahead, Erin.
sorry, I was just gonna say, maybe this is too in the weeds at this point, but are any roadway infrastructure that's part of the site, is that town roadway, or is that kind of a part of a private development, or
Yeah, it's indeterminate at this point. I think there is going to be at least one public way to connect up with Commonwealth Ave. But I think maybe the rest of it could be private. But we're going to need to think about what's, for a 30-acre parcel, what percentage should we allocate for roadway infrastructure? And subtract that out of the mix, so we have sort of a clearer picture of what it is that we're actually, how many acres are we actually planning for? So, and I think that'll be the subject of that sort of site constraints analysis that we'll do at our next meeting.
Um,
Go ahead.
so I kind of, first off, Linda knows this, but if I start going down a path of overstepping my bounds, I definitely want everybody to say, hey, take a step back. Because I'm kind of entrenched in this in a different way than all of you. So my feelings won't be hurt. So based on that last conversation, adding a bullet, understanding existing environmental site constraints and any future development constraints that may be imposed by the state and or town needs. Does that capture that comment?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
So then you have so as far as the reviewing the RF and it's an RFQ for the zoning consultant. So it would be the town's zoning consultant with town staff. I'd like to end that topic right there. I don't think I don't think duplication of effort with DCAM consultants is that the actual zoning piece is not something that DCAM is going to do or undertake at all. So I don't think there's going to be any problem with any duplication of error on the zoning side of it, because they, as far as I understand, and Dan, you may have a different insight, but they're not going to be doing any of that. They will not be developing zoning.
I feel comfortable with your putting the period where you suggested.
Yeah, I agree.
I think actively listen to community input and to help strategize, or not strategize, but help develop various land use scenarios. So I think all of you are going to be actively listening to community input, but for this particular group, what is that goal for you? Is it to help develop various land use scenarios and inform the selection of a preferred scenario? I just think you can expand on that one just a little bit more.
I think we'll learn more from Dan and others about who's bringing on this visionary master planning consultant, but I think we're the conduit between taking that community input and working it in with the consultants to make sure that they're incorporating all the needs and hearing about our community needs.
I see Linda and then Dan.
Apropos of number 3, it seemed to me that nowhere have we acknowledged that this parcel is in the West Concord area. And, so our process wouldn't be the same if it was over at Virginia Road or, over by the Thoreau Club. I mean, so I think we somehow need to say, reflects, not only just listening to the community input, but what we're going to create in terms of zoning is something that would be appropriate to the space in which we find ourselves. And I think, again, given his sort of historic sensitivity of being in West Concord, we should acknowledge that it is a unique location even within Concord.
So the understanding the existing environmental site constraints, the West Concord Village constraints for any future development, and any future development constraints that of the site that may be imposed by the state or town needs. I think that's a good place to insert that.
I'm good with that, but I think we may have to take one more pass at this all.
Oh, yeah, no,
together.
this needs to be wordsmith, definitely.
Yeah, I'm gonna suggest that, at the end of the meeting, we send a draft around and, respond to all with edits so that we can all look at any changes that are being made. But I think this is a good process. So Dan, and then Aaron, and then
So where I thought, Elizabeth, you were going, and maybe you were a little bit, is on 3. It seems like this might be the place to insert something about visual studies. So it's absolutely active listening, but I think embedded in this is an expectation that we're going to be able to somehow figure out how to help various audiences understand what's being proposed. And so I think that wants to be in here somewhere, and this may be the right place for it, but I just throw that out for people's consideration. And then the other thing, and then I will lower my hand, is I don't see anywhere where we specifically talk about sustainability or climate resilience.
that needs to be added.
I would agree. So, we're going to be in front of CCAN in a month or so, and I'm sure we're going to get an earful about that, as we should.
So consistent with the town's sustainability principles and climate resilient goals. So
All right, so I have 2 recommendations for that. So up in the subcommittee objective, to assist and support in the community visioning scenario process, capture the community engagement input to develop land use scenarios, identify community impacts and benefits for the scenarios that advance the town's sustainability and climate resilience goals. So that potential zoning for preferred land use scenario can be advanced to town meeting for the MCI Concord site and the adjacent Junction Village parcel. The subcommittee will also work to develop site development specifications that may be incorporated into the DCAM disposition RFP process. So it does need to be wordsmith, but it's a placeholder.
that's heading in the right direction. Aaron, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, 2 things. I think that objective was good. I think a lot of the things in there may be key responsibilities that we want to pull in. Like the objective could be a bit shorter and we pull some of those other elements into responsibilities a bit. I kind of wrote up my proposal for number 3 as a sentence. I guess I can't chat here. I just said, in conjunction with the community outreach subcommittee, receive and synthesize community input for use in identifying possible site uses and convey that to the community.
That replaces actively listen.
That would be my sense. My
Okay,
suggestion.
you want to say it one more time, just a tad slower?
Yeah, I can also email it or add it to the draft when we are circulating it. I just said, in conjunction with the community outreach subcommittee, receive and synthesize community input for use in identifying possible site uses and convey that to the community.
Yeah. So, okay,
Sorry,
that's all right.
I wish I could. Oh, can I paste? I don't think I can paste it in the chat, but
I don't think, oh, can we do chat?
no,
Is
no
chat
chatting
meaningful?
allowed. No, no chatting.
Thank
I'll
you.
just add it to the draft.
Thanks, Sarah. Right, other items that we might want to add? So sort of sliding back to the agenda, we'll circulate the draft subcommittee charter for everyone's input. We've got a work plan, so we know that next time we meet, we'll be looking at site constraints for the parcel, including potential town and state uses. And so for that end, does anybody have any suggestions for Elizabeth to include in the GIS layers that will be put on the map of the parcel? So we've talked riverfront setback, floodplain, wetlands, the wastewater treatment facility, the beds associated with the wastewater treatment facility. Anything else people think we should be identifying?
How about how Route 2, I know I'd be premature, but how's Route 2 going to affect the site? And all the rework of all the roadways around the site. I know it's probably hard to do right now, but is there any way to do that?
I think we will have that meeting with Mass Highway at some point in the near future, and we ask it there, but at least we'll have, a base that we can add and subtract to and from. I see Dan has his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to, I had sent, Peter he just was curious. I had sent him this little visual that shows what an area approximately the same size as MCI would look like if it was overlain on Southfield neighborhood, which is quarter acre zoning, residence C and residence B. And I don't know if I found it interesting to look at. And so it may be something that we as a committee want to look at a couple of different neighborhoods just to, we don't have we don't necessarily have something that looks like 15 homes per acre, as far as I know. So I throw that out as, for me, I found it helpful. I don't know how others would feel but that is
Right,
something.
I'd suggest we share that with the entire committee for the next meeting, and then I just sent to Shannon's email box. There was a article from the Lincoln Land Institute on visualizing what 15 acres looks 15 units per acre looks like, and it has a bunch of examples. And I think we can take a look at that as well for our next meeting.
To give you an idea, so correct me if I'm wrong, Linda. I think Concord Green is 13 units per acre. If you want an actual.
That's great. Thank you. We were also asked to look at work at budgetary requests, and I think we identified the need for scenario planning. scenario / fiscal impact planning. And we can just bring that back to the full committee and ask that it, be covered or at least budgeted for moving forward.
And also visuals, didn't Dan discuss that?
Yes, I think we do the visual piece. We just put that in our next meeting agenda. Do you want us to discuss that with the full board, Linda? Is that what you're suggesting?
Oh, I thought Dan was talking earlier about visuals to present to the community and having some consultant generate when we get to the scenarios phase. I wasn't exactly sure, but it sounded like that would be an expense.
That is what that is what I meant. That would be part of the, it's from my perspective, it's not just a matter of listening to people, because sometimes people don't, especially people that are outside the circle of planning world, don't have the visual vocabulary or the verbal vocabulary to express what it is that they're trying to do. They know it when they see it, and they know it, maybe they don't like. So just providing the tools to kind of understand some of these big issues, visual references, that kind of stuff.
That's great.
And
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so I do think that's, from my perspective, it's one of our key responsibilities, but I'm sure it could be incorporated somehow into one of these other ones.
It's great.
I'm sorry, I should know this, but are we on until 3:30 or 3?
3 o'clock is action item recap.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Are you going to mention, Peter? Are we going to have a chance, you think, to just visit the consulting matrix?
I thought we were going to, that was going to be with the entire committee on Monday.
So it probably will be. On the other hand, I think I'd like to, if possible, introduce it to people on the committee, just to give them a chance to think about it. This is something that Scott suggested, and I'm a big fan of it. It's an attempt to kind of capture in a visual and to organize our thinking in terms of who are we going to need for outside consultants, when are we going to need them, who's responsible for getting it, kind of this conversation that we're beginning to have about the visual studies, and eventually a budget and a timeline and any sort of predecessors. So
you want
Scott,
to share screen?
or Peter, or do you want me to try to find it?
Yeah, why? Yeah, if you could try and find it.
All right, I'll do that while you're.
Okay, well, so Aaron, we really need a sort of liaison with community outreach. Would you be our sort of point person for that?
That makes sense.
That'd be much appreciated.
Sure.
And then here's the, you asked for it, you got a Toyota moment for Scott Bates. So this is sort of what we asked for in terms of consultants and such, and it's bigger than what you can see on the screen.
Well, I think it was really helpful for the entire committee and as well as DCAM to really understand all the consultants that are going to be engaged throughout this process, the timetable, the predecessors, and who's going to be issuing the RFPs and who's being managing them and whose budget it's going to be coming from. Because we've been asked to spend this money shortly, but we don't know what we're spending our money on. So this outlined, I worked with Dan and others putting this together, sort of all the different consultants, and the timetables, and well, we can put the timetables together, but it's basically a starting point. It's just a concept we can work with and we can talk about on Monday, but it's it really goes through all the different steps, and we can put, who's responsible. Is it DCAM, MCI, or Concord? What's the deliverable? Who's doing the RFP? Who's responsible for the RFP? And what's the cost range? Because if we all of a sudden are responsible for the visioning architect planner, and that's over $1 million, we don't have that in our budget. So it's good to know what the budgets are for these different types of contractors, consultants. So this is just a start. It was just a big picture, global look at the entire process for everybody's help.
Well, thank you. By the way, thank Dan, thanks Scott, and everybody who worked on this. This is a great.
We'll talk about it on Monday, though.
All right. People, my advice is we all take a look at that and, think on it and be prepared to come in with and discuss it with the full committee meeting next week.
Yeah, we got to share that. Everybody.
Yeah, did I miss it? Was it sent around?
Yeah, it was sent to the chair. So let's send.
Okay.
We'll send it around.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And let's see. Next on the agenda is public comment. Any comment? All right. Action item recap and adjournment. So we're going to circulate the draft subcommittee charter for people to mark up and share with all. We've noted what's going to be on our agenda for our next meeting, which is going to be the site constraints. And we're going to also look at the visualization of what 15 acres looks like, and then the piece that Dan sent about is it Southwick? Is that what?
Southfield.
Southfield, yeah. And then we'll report back that we've identified the need for visualization tools so that people can understand what the potential development scenarios might look like, because a lot of people are visual learners. And we also identified the need for scenario planning and fiscal analysis, and that needs to be budgeted.
Peter, I would think I would add one item, and I don't know if we're going to be ready to do this or not, but I'm feeling some pressure from the DCAM meetings that we as a group should start to talk about, think about, so that we can make a recommendation to the whole group, who should be leading that charge on the visualization piece or the visioning piece. DCAM or Concord.
Okay.
And I'm saying that I don't know that there's an imminent deadline, but I kind of really want to, it's somewhat selfish for this group. I want us to be ahead of that.
Okay. So does that mean that we would be hiring the visualization consultant, or does that mean we would be managing or co-managing?
I think the construct is perhaps important, but I think just getting clarity about what I'm concerned about. I'll say this in this meeting. I've said it, I think, in DCAM or other circle, but I'm concerned about the optics of how townspeople may feel if this visioning process, which is going to have such an enormous impact on how the land is redeveloped, is not seen as emanating from the town. We have a very constructive relationship with DCAM, and I fully expect that it will continue to do that. And I also sense after this last meeting that we're going to get pressed back because I think they view that as part of their charge. And I think we just need to get very clear among ourselves if that is, maybe we want to look at two scenarios. One scenario that we lead it, one scenario that they lead it, and maybe there's a hybrid. I don't know how that would even work, but where it's jointly. I just think because it's not enough for us to say, in my mind, for us to say, no, we're going to lead it. I think we need to say, here are the reasons why we think it's important. And if we can, the only way to resolve any conflicts there will be to understand what it is that everybody wants and try to find some way forward that optimizes everybody's objectives.
See, Scott and Elizabeth. Scott? Your hand's up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put it up, but I agree with Dan. I'm not sure it could be a joint effort, but we can discuss this later on. I totally agree. The optics, about concern for the optics. So I'm in agreement with Dan. We should definitely get ahead of this before DCAM goes out with an RFP and moves forward without us.
Okay, Elizabeth?
So just from a town planner's perspective, I agree with so far the sentiment that I don't think DCAM's going to give up the visioning piece of this project, because I do think that is in their charge. That is it. It's very specific in what it says. I am going to really caution trying to have the town do a separate process. It's kind of like when you go sign blind. You will create a level of confusion that you will not be able to overcome. And this is just something, I think Linda and I, experienced with the MBTA communities. If you try and have two separate processes, you're not going to get 100% with either one then. So I think my best suggestion, my opinion is you're going to have this process that DCAM's going to go through. And I think when you're talking with like community engagement, you need to supplement that process with additional means of pulling in, comments and interactions and the really, the boots on the ground day-to-day things that DCAM and whoever they hire is not going to do. And, whether that's the weekly hour coffees that Linda and I did for MBTA communities, having somebody, that's doing this, community engagement and pulling in people's input and supplementing what DCAM is going to do. I think that's where you're gonna get the most bang for your buck, and you're gonna get different people engaged. A lot of people don't like to do those big workshops. We had anywhere between 3 and 12 people at some of our things, and the perspectives we got were different. So that's going to be my recommendation on that piece of things. I also what I'm envisioning as far as the zoning consultant, getting them on board as soon as possible. So they're kind of like the town's what's the word that I'm looking for, Scott, when you have your like consultant, so they'll be listening to everything that's happening, with the whole DCAM and the visioning side piece, and basically being able to say, hey, think about this, or, what's happening now kind of doesn't work from a zoning perspective. And so, being a sounding board, as things move forward, that's how I see things working.
So my suggestion, Peter, if I can make one, would be for the everybody, the members of this subcommittee to sort of identify their concerns or the pluses and minuses of the scenario, so that when we get together next time, we can maybe see how if and how they overlap, and put together a memo or something that just we can communicate to DCAM and try to advance this to resolve, to end up at a place that we all feel happy about, comfortable with.
Right, I think that's a great suggestion, Dan. Again, sort of action items that we're going to be looking at, we'll add identifying the pluses and minuses of who's leading the visioning piece, the town, DCAM, or some hybrid, and we'll send around the visualization piece that Dan shared. We'll send around the
I will take this
charter.
Yeah, I will take this draft of this charter. I will actually just send it to Shannon, since she's the repository, and have her send that out to the subcommittee.
But Shannon is gone for another 10 days or so.
Oh, is it 10 days? I
Yeah,
thought she was coming back.
I think the whole thing was like 15
Yeah.
or 18, something like
I
that.
think she ran it in like 3 hours and something. I mean, like amazingly fast.
It would take anyone 10 days to recover from that, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll check in with Megan on how she wants it, but I'll get it to the committee.
thank you. All right, any last words, folks?
Thank you, Peter.
All right, well,
Thank
thank you
you.
for a
Thank you.
productive meeting, folks. Appreciate it. And see you next week at the full committee meeting.